Welcome to TheKillFile, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Spears. Each week, we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown because, in TheKillFile, nothing stays buried forever. Hey guys, welcome to episode 53 of TheKillFile. I am so glad that you guys are back here for part 2 of last week's case. Before we jump in, just a few reminders. First off, if you are interested in supporting the podcast, go ahead and rate, review, or subscribe wherever you listen. This is the absolute best way to boost the podcast so that other people can find us, and it only takes a second. This fall, I am going to be rolling out some bonus content called The Hidden Files, where you can pay a few bucks a month and get some extra episodes from me as well, alongside other perks. One of the categories of the episodes are going to be something called Listener Files, where my listeners can email me either like a hometown murder, maybe it's not a super well-known one, maybe it's what got you interested in true crime in the first place, or maybe it's just something crazy that happened to you or someone in your family. Anything that you can think that might be worth sharing, you can email me the story at thekillfilepodcast@gmail.com and use the subject of Listener Files. Don't forget to check out the website at thekillfile.com if you want to submit a case for me to check out, if you want to check out the merch. Just as a reminder from last week, part 1 of the death of Aundria Bowman, this week we are going to cover part 2, where we are going to delve into more details about the case and what happened to poor Aundria. Trigger warnings for today are going to be murder, rape of a minor, sexual assault on a minor, and molestation. Let's jump in. Where we last left off, Kathy and Ed actually were headed to Michigan to investigate further and try to find some answers in 2013. If you can remember, this is just after Kathy had the thought that a man named Dennis Bowman, the adoptive father of Aundria Bowman, may have been responsible or at least had something to do with Aundria's disappearance. Ed had said that they would go out there for as long as it took to find Aundria, and again, I just love this man. He seems so wonderful. Ed, Kathy, and Carl, the web sleuth, tried to meet with as many people as they could meet with who would talk to them about Aundria and find out more information. A few people that they would end up meeting are Brenda's cousin and his wife, and 3 friends of Aundria's named Jennifer, Kim, and Michelle. Michelle actually recanted a story about a time where she had gone over to Aundria's house, and when they got there, Aundria told her to wait to go inside, which was seemingly odd to Michelle. She then said that Aundria went inside, and her dad, Dennis, immediately started screaming and chasing after her, and during the chase had grabbed her foot, and she fell. The friend was still standing outside the door and never went inside and ended up just leaving. She saw Aundria at school that next Monday, and she asked her friend what happened, and Aundria said that her father was mad that she was quote-unquote late getting off the bus, but Michelle said that they were definitely not late. Aundria's school friend Kim later recanted a time when she was over at Aundria's house during dinner time, and while Brenda and Dennis both ate hamburgers, Aundria and Kim were only allowed to eat ketchup, mustard, and relish between 2 pieces of bread, and I think that they called it like a leftover sandwich, and that was it. Kim would further state that at the same dinner, Dennis had hit Aundria from across the table so hard that it almost knocked the poor girl off her chair, and while this was happening, Brenda just acted like nothing was happening and kept feeding Vanessa as a baby. Kim then said Aundria was crying after she had been hit, of course, and no one did anything. During the time that Aundria was allegedly running away from home, as Dennis and Brenda had stated, it turns out that Aundria had been staying at her friend Jennifer's house, hiding from her adoptive parents for about 4 days. Jennifer would say that Aundria had told her about some abuse that was taking place at the Bowman home. She told Jennifer that her adoptive father, Dennis, would come into her room late at night and would molest her, forcing her to do things that she did not want to do. Jennifer said that she was just 13 years old and told Aundria that she had to tell somebody about what was going on inside her home. So the next day, both Jennifer and Aundria, when they arrived at school, went straight to the principal's office to try and tell an adult about the abuse that was going on inside the home. Michelle said that at their school, when they had a problem with the parents at home, the sheriff's office would send a deputy to the school, and then they would call the parents to come into the principal's office as well. Michelle then said that they would ask the child right in front of their parents to tell them what was going on. And of course, with your parents sitting right there and being put on the spot like that, you're going to say that nothing was wrong because you were probably scared. Then it was said that they would just send the children back to their parents like nothing happened. I just don't understand. First off, why would you bring the parents into a meeting with the authorities? Like, what in the actual fuck? What did they think would happen? If someone is making a claim about something going on in their home or that something that has happened to them to an adult other than their own parents, it's for a reason. Shouldn't it be the authorities' job to listen to the child about the abuse or whatever the situation is and then go speak separately to the parents about the claims? That way the child isn't scared of their parents or the repercussions or whatever. It's mind-boggling to me that this is the way that they used to handle these types of situations. I hope that this has been remedied. Brenda would be interviewed as saying that there was an argument going on one day where Aundria told Brenda that Dennis was indeed molesting her, and Brenda's response was, quote, "That's a lie." She then said that at the time, Aundria was in fact going to counseling, and the parents' response to Aundria's claims was to take her to the minister. It was said that the minister went in and talked to Aundria by himself first, and then after a while, the minister called Dennis and Brenda in and asked Aundria to say what she had said in front of her parents, and this is when Aundria had to say she had lied. Then the minister proceeded to ask her right in front of Brenda and Dennis if Aundria knew what that kind of allegation could do to her father. I remember on the documentary they were all talking about, like if you're put on the spot in front of your parents or if the minister has access to you first, trying to kind of convince you that this isn't what's happening, that's what the child is going to turn around and have to say, is that it wasn't true or whatever. So this is kind of a side note, but it's one that hits home, and it hits home really hard. And although this is something that I normally don't talk about with many people, I feel the need to share it because it could make a difference in someone else's life. So I was molested as a child by a bad man that was in my life, and I kept it a secret for a long time. My friends knew what was going on because I had no one else to talk to about it in my life. Even though this man was abusive towards myself and my mother, there was no counseling after this person was finally out of our lives. I was scared to tell anyone. I was scared and young and didn't realize how bad of a situation it really was. This was someone who was supposed to love me and care for me, and they hurt me in a way that I couldn't fully understand until I was a much older adult. So when I was in 6th grade, this was roughly 2 years after the man had left our lives, I was having a hard time in school, things were changing at home, and I was just going through it. So one day I was at school in the counselor's office, and I remember being there more than once, but I don't remember how often or how many times I had gone. When one day, after I felt apparently comfortable enough to do so with a trusted adult, I broke down and told her what had happened to me when I was younger. This started a situation that I did not fully understand. I remember feeling like it was a huge weight lifted off my chest, like I had finally told an adult that something that didn't seem right had been happening to me for a while since I was much younger. And it felt so good to not feel alone anymore. To feel like someone could help me take care of the emotions that I was feeling and that I would not have to face this by myself anymore. I can't even explain the feeling of just like freedom I had, you guys. So the next thing I remember was finding out that the counselor by law had to alert the authorities and this person was arrested. I think the counselor may have told me, but it could have been my mother. That part is a little blurry. But the next thing that happened is something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. When I got home that day, my mother was there waiting for me. And instead of being supportive or hugging me or saying anything kind, she was mad at me. She was pissed at me, in fact, and full of questions the minute I got home. I remember feeling like I was in trouble, but not exactly understanding why she was so mad at me. Not only did she tell me that she did not believe me, but she also berated me with a ton of questions, all skewed as to letting me know exactly why there was no way this had happened. My own mother did not believe me. Instead of stopping and asking herself why she was so upset, maybe feeling like she didn't protect me the way she should have, maybe because she didn't know what had been going on while she wasn't home, maybe even mad at herself that she wasn't the kind of mother that her own daughter felt like she could open up to. No, instead my mother lashed out at her 11-year-old daughter, making it very clear that she was not on her side. She made me feel ashamed, embarrassed, and like there was something wrong with me. She chose for whatever reason to believe the abusive man who she knew to be abusive over her own daughter. It gets worse. Instead of stopping for a minute to ask herself before she shamed her daughter for something that was not her fault, she could have asked herself one simple question. Why would my 11-year-old daughter make this up? what would be the motive or the reasoning? The man was out of their lives, and he was no longer around, so why would this 6th grader make up a story like this out of the blue? No. Instead, my mother was so angry with me and then proceeded to try and convince me that this was not true. And after the man was released from custody, she forced me to call and apologize to my abuser. Yeah. Yep. So fucked up, and something that I will never forgive my mother for in this lifetime. One of the questions I remember my mother asking me that made me feel like I was bad or I was wrong or that I was gross somehow was when she asked me that if this had happened, then why did I still want to see the bad man after he had left our lives? At the time, I can't even remember getting a chance to answer, but it's a question that I have pondered so much in my life. Like, why did I still visit that person for a short time after he had left our lives? I think there are many reasons a victim may still see their abusers, especially if it's the only person in that position that they have ever known, or maybe only being 9 when the man left their lives, they didn't realize that the things that had happened to them was weird. When you grow up in a household like this, you're going through so much trauma that you cling on to any type of normalcy that you can. Maybe the victim was afraid to not go because then their mother would start asking questions like, why? Maybe the man had a child that the victim was also attached to and wanted to see. There are 1,000,000,001 reasons that someone may still love or see their abuser, and it does not mean that that 11-year-old innocent child was lying. I'm telling you guys this story for truly one purpose only. Not for pity, not to victimize myself, but to tell my listeners out there that if a child comes to you and tells you that they are being abused or hurt by someone, believe them. Just believe them. Take the time to listen to them, take the time to support them, and take the time to get them some help if you're in a position to. It could make all the difference in the world for their lives and for their trauma. I have to play devil's advocate here just to be honest and say that I'm sure that there have been times where a child has said things that were not true before. Of course there's been. But as someone who actually was molested as a child and who had no one to turn to, I'm willing to bet more times than not the child is telling the truth. Maybe you don't even realize that you're going to be the person that the child or whoever ends up confiding in. But if you ever find yourself in this unique position to be that person, I hope that you don't make the mistake of shaming them, traumatizing them further, hurting them, leaving them without any trust or any hope, and leaving them feeling all alone. Children do not deserve that. I really do think this is why in my own life, I always want my children or any children around me to feel like they can trust me with absolutely anything, because they can. I will believe a child no matter what, because this story has happened so many times around my own life, and not just my own story, but it makes me sick to think about how normalized molestation used to be, and still is in some instances. It happened to so many of us, and it's time to stop the cycle of abuse. Going through what I went through, and it taking my mother well into my 30s to finally just once apologize for not believing me, I feel has helped me want to advocate for any children in my life to have someone that they can trust and to tell things to. And luckily, I have been able to be that person to quite a few children. I would never tell another person how to parent, but I can tell you one thing. When you break the trust with your child in such a huge way like this, even once, let alone time and time again, it will affect the rest of their lives. It will teach them to trust no one, to not let people in, to always feel like they have their backs against the world, and sometimes the damage is just more than they can handle. It took me 37 years to finally realize that blood is not thicker than water, and you don't have to have relationships with toxic people just because you share their DNA. You get one life, and you get to choose how to live it. Also, to any of my fellow listeners who have been through something like this and have not yet heard it, you are not alone. This does not define you. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. There is something wrong with the people who take advantage of others, especially children. And no, it's not okay. Okay, so back to Aundria. Aundria feeling like she had no one in the world who would listen to her is something that poor girl should not have had to go through. And knowing that feeling all too well myself, it puts in perspective why she all of a sudden may have started having a hard time in school or in her home life. Maybe she couldn't take it anymore. Kathy would later on say that she was really proud of Aundria for going to the principal at her school and trying to get some help in the right places, and that she felt like Aundria was just like herself, and that she was just done being treated a certain way. Brenda's cousin's wife, Sue, ended up calling and reporting Dennis for his odd behavior and urged the authorities to check into Dennis more when it came to Aundria's disappearance. She was on his trail. So while Kathy and Carl were on the road meeting with various people in Aundria's life, Carl would inform Kathy about something called the Freedom of Information Act, which is basically the public's right to access records from any federal agency, according to FOIA.gov. This is when Kathy and Carl would use it to get information about Dennis Bowman. This is when they would learn about the 2 cases that were on Dennis's record. The first one was about stalking a coworker and then breaking and entering her home. And after they had caught Dennis for this, authorities were able to search his home. After the search, they would find a bag that contained not only a mask that would conceal his face, but the woman who had been stalked's lingerie and a frickin' sawed-off shotgun. Dennis was only sentenced to about a year in jail for that, which seems like it's not enough time for breaking and entering and stalking, when clearly there was more to this story. It is still a problem in this fucking country that stalking is not taken seriously enough. It almost always escalates. When will the authorities catch on? Then the second charge that was on his record was from when he was 31 years old, and this was back on May 23, 1980 in Holland, Michigan. Dennis had attacked a teenage girl with a gun, screaming at her to get off her bike and start heading towards the woods. She was obviously scared, and then Dennis would pull the trigger and shoot the gun just past the girl, yelling for her to again get off her bike and head towards the woods. And then he proceeded to shoot the gun next to her foot. Dennis then pointed the gun at her and threatened to blow a hole through her when she saw a truck driving by. She flagged them down, she threw her bike in the back, and the lady driving tore off. When the authorities would nab Dennis for this, he then proceeded to tell the police that he needed to pick up his daughter from school. So, Aundria was 6 years old when this had happened, and during the proceedings for this, the judge would state that he felt that Dennis was a danger to women any time that he was not locked up. Dennis Bowman was then sentenced 5 to 10 years in February of 1981 for the attack on the teenage girl. Brenda, by all accounts from the documentary to the articles, seems to be the type of woman who is not only in denial about the horrible human being that she is married to, but is also blindly faithful and supportive of her husband until the very end, which makes me question how much she knew. I know there is a lot of speculation as to how much that she actually did know and just said nothing, but of course that's just conjecture. However, her actions during this entire case prove their point, that she knows more than it seems. It blows my mind that she would accuse her daughter of lying about the molestation from Dennis when he is clearly a predator. Turns out Brenda had been taking Aundria to see Dennis in prison. I wonder if they told her why he was in prison. I'm gonna guess not. He probably even told Brenda that this was some sort of misunderstanding because usually people like this, they don't like to admit to the things that they're doing. When Aundria was around 11 years old, Dennis would be released from prison. Family of the Bowmans would say that they were all pretty surprised that she not only stayed with Dennis, but also knowing that he could do something to Aundria. Learning about this is what sealed the deal in Kathy's mind about the fact that she felt Dennis was absolutely responsible for the disappearance of her daughter. She would say, quote, "I had a gut feeling about him." This is when Kathy would say that she was not going to stop until she found out the truth. Not only did she publicly let the Bowmans and everyone around them know that she thought that Dennis was the one who killed her daughter, but she passed out flyers, she hung flyers up, and she even hired a private investigator. Kathy on the documentary would admit while chuckling that she had basically harassed the couple into them going into the police station to talk about her, and while the couple was there, Dennis was offered water, which he took, drank, and left the cup behind. Now the authorities had his DNA. See, it turns out that the authorities were already looking into Dennis on a totally unrelated case of a 25-year-old woman named Kathleen Doyle back in 1980 who was the wife of a Navy pilot who was killed in her own home in Norfolk, Virginia. Evidence that had been left behind at the scene of the murder was in the form of seminal fluid from the rape kit that the authorities had conducted post-mortem, And also there had been a stain of seminal fluid on the bedspread as well, which back in the 80s they probably couldn't do much with. So, after the authorities believed that it was Dennis that may have been responsible for the murder of Kathleen Doyle, they were able to match his DNA from the cup left behind at the police station to the sample taken at the crime scene of Kathleen Doyle. It was indeed a match. Now they were going to be able to bring Dennis in, and this was just in 2019, and charge him with the rape and murder of Kathleen Doyle, which at first he, of course, denies. After spending some time with one of the homicide detectives over a period of time, he eventually makes up his own version of what happened, saying that he was completely drunk, basically casually went into this home looking for money, saw her and had this teeny tiny blade on him, and when he went to grab her arm, she flung it down and together they kind of stabbed her. He claimed that Kathleen was still alive when he left, which authorities of course knew he was completely full of shit. They had been eyeing him for a while and basically knew that he was worse than he was letting on. On the documentary, he tells the investigator about a quote-unquote demon inside of him that is getting bigger and bigger. After this whole song and dance about his version of things, the investigator finally drops the hammer and confronts him about how badly he beat, raped, and killed Kathleen. According to the investigation into Kathleen Doyle's murder, while her husband was deployed on the USS Eisenhower, her crime scene would reveal a brutal attack. According to an article on Sportskita, I don't know if I butchered that, sorry, Kathleen seemed to put up one hell of a fight trying to defend herself. She had been stabbed multiple times, as well as been stabbed in the back. The documentary would say that she had been found with her hands tied behind her back with a cord, and some sort of electrical cord tied around her neck. Kathleen had also been gagged with a pair of what I'm assuming were her own blue leotards shoved into her mouth. Her body had been obviously beaten. There was also said to be a burn mark on her cheek, which was later possibly connected to a burned Lincoln log that had been found in the garage. There was an obvious want to torture and hurt this poor woman, in my opinion. After Dennis was being charged with the murder of Kathleen Doyle, the authorities would ask Brenda if there was any more information that she may know than what she is saying, or if she had any more information about Aundria's case. She had nothing to share with them and still said that she hoped to find Aundria alive. The authorities still had the goal of finding out what happened to Aundria, so they used Brenda's ability to overlook Dennis's confession to one murder and try to entice a confession out of Dennis about Aundria. In fact, the authorities came up with the plan of offering Dennis a deal. If he would confess or tell them about Aundria, then the authorities would consider letting him spend his time in a prison in Michigan where he could have visits from his wife because he was going to be extradited to Virginia for the Kathleen Doyle case. He said he didn't have any information and then was telling his wife Brenda that basically it's not okay to kill family. He would even say you can yell or scream or whatever, but not kill them. After scouring Dennis's property, they could not find Aundria's body or any evidence. Of course, Dennis was still denying having done anything to his daughter. Then, out of nowhere, Dennis asked to meet with his wife, and this excited the authorities because obviously this was something big. Dennis was brought into a room to meet with Brenda, and this is where he would tell his wife that he knew that Aundria was indeed dead and that she had been this entire time. This is when he would confess on camera to what happened the night of Aundria's disappearance. Dennis would say that he had came home from dropping Brenda off at work, laid Vanessa on the couch, and proceeded up the stairs. He then said that Aundria at the same time had been coming out of their bedroom, and when he asked her what was going on, she would tell him she was leaving. Dennis then said him and Aundria started fighting, where he was telling her that she was absolutely not leaving, and Aundria had allegedly threatened to tell her counselors that Dennis had molested her. Dennis then said she won't do that, and then proceeded to hit her. Dennis then tells his now crying wife that Aundria supposedly fell backwards down the stairs, and right after the words came out of his mouth on the documentary, Brenda starts saying no over and over, and then fucking says, quote, "Don't admit to something you didn't do." This woman, I can't even. So now Dennis is crying as if he gives two shits. He then stated that he ran down and checked her pulse and that she didn't have one and she was not breathing at the time. Bullshit. This is just my own opinion, but I don't believe this fucker's story for 1 second. I do believe that he killed her, and there is no doubt about that, but this story that he tells is just complete and utter bullshit. Again, in my own opinion. I script this out as I learn the case so that my reactions can be in real time. I feel like he had been molesting Aundria, that he had had a history of abusing women, raping women, and killing women at the time, but back then, no one knew, and he probably felt like he needed to get rid of Aundria when she started coming out and telling everybody what he was doing to her. What an actual piece of fucking shit. God, I fucking hate this guy. He then tells Brenda, through his sobs, that when he was checking her for signs of life, that something was wrong with her neck, and that it didn't seem normal, and that she had staring eyes, and he knew that she was dead. Dennis then told Brenda that he didn't want to lose her or their daughter Vanessa, and didn't want to chance having to go back to prison. He then said he wrapped Aundria's body inside of a blanket, and he hid her body in the barn on their property, and called the police to report Aundria missing. As Dennis was confessing his alleged story, all I could think of was that if Aundria had been killed by this supposed broken neck, which again, I do not believe, but would she not have bled from her mouth and nose? Like, wouldn't he have had to clean up blood before calling the cops, or no? I tried looking this up, but the information wasn't pertaining to a broken neck specifically, so if anyone knows about this, let me know what you know, because I am morbidly curious about what would actually happen. Dennis then stated that Aundria's body remained in the barn for a few days until he finally found what he called a cardboard barrel to put the body in, but then said that he tried to put Aundria's body in the barrel, but it wouldn't fit. Then, on the documentary, he said to his wife on the recording, quote, "Honey, in order to make it fit, I had to cut her legs off," end quote. Holy fucking shit, right? Just the mere fact that he said in order to make it fit, completely dehumanizing her. I'm sorry, we're talking about your daughter. No? You could see that Brenda had kind of glanced at him when he was saying this, and then she turned her head and she couldn't even look at him. Dennis then alleged that a few days after that, when the neighbors had put out their own trash, he had stuck the barrel out there with the garbage, and that very next morning, she was apparently gone. Brenda was extremely upset, not only that he had lied to her for 31 years, but she also said she could understand why he was scared, but that he should have gotten her some help because she was their daughter. Then she said that she had spent so long defending Dennis against Kathy, and all the while, Dennis is pretending to cry. So, after this confession, Kathy would go on to say that she didn't believe a word of his story, which neither did I. Dennis then tells the authority that he allegedly burned her coat and bag that she had with her. When the authorities asked Dennis when he would have burned the bag and the coat, he said that he did this after he carried her out to the barn, before he called the police, which makes no fucking sense. How would the police not chuck a barrel allegedly on fire when there was supposedly a missing teenage girl? People around this case, including Kathy and the authorities, can't understand why Brenda is still with Dennis and is still supporting him. Again, many people and friends of Aundria believe Brenda knew exactly what was going on. In fact, some people believed that she would be an accomplice and be charged. So while Dennis was obviously still in jail, I believe that he was awaiting at least one trial, the authorities concluded that while yes, it was possible he set Aundria's remains out with the trash, that it seemed like more of a riskier move than Dennis was probably willing to make, and therefore they wanted to dig a little deeper into what else could have been possible. They started reading the letters between Dennis and Brenda and noticed that there were some things that contradicted what Dennis had said to be the truth in his confession. In a letter to his wife, Dennis confessed that while the rest of his confession was true, that he didn't actually throw away Aundria's body, but instead buried it next to what he called a quote-unquote private graveyard. He proceeded to describe what he is now claiming to be the truth and what he did, and I'm telling you that he makes this sound and seem respectful, peaceful, and a nice thing that he did for his daughter. Ugh, it's so gross, and he is such a manipulator. He tells Brenda that he grabbed a clean white sheet for the body and then wrapped her up inside of it, but that between the sheet and her remains, he put cinnamon and cedar chips. Then buried her in a grave and watered it down. The authorities used ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs and tried to find the remains because they wanted to have those for his trial, knowing that it would help to convict him. The police would tell Dennis that they know that he is just creating stories and that he seemed almost proud of this fact, and then he proceeded to tell the authorities that he was going to take where his daughter was buried to his grave and never tell a soul. The authorities then went to Brenda, wanting her to get Dennis to confess to where Aundria's remains are so that he could stay in Michigan. She starts asking Dennis time and time again to tell her where the body is so that she can have closure and have the ashes at home with her, but Dennis will not budge. During one particular phone call, Dennis finally spills the beans to Brenda, saying that Aundria was very close and that he actually buried her in their own backyard. As Dennis is trying to confess to Brenda where Aundria's remains are, Brenda on the documentary gets very upset, telling Dennis they didn't even live at the same house when Aundria was killed, seemingly annoyed that he is full of shit again. That's just my opinion, but that's what it seemed like. Dennis then confesses to having the barrel with the remains of Aundria inside buried at their old property, and then when they decided to move, he moved her remains to the new property. He then says he buried the barrel on the property exactly in the same spot where Kathy had guessed that he had put her, which was some kind of weird area away from their house that never really seemed right to Kathy because it was kind of a weird spot for some items to be placed like so far back. She had called this spot since the beginning. The authorities would dig and they would find a barrel with Aundria's remains inside, and they would state that she was inside of 4 different bags and that the barrel was also full of dirty diapers as well, which I think is very telling of how he felt about his supposed daughter. The authorities were able to test the remains' DNA and prove that it was indeed Aundria that had been buried back there. So Kathy was correct in her feelings that not only did Dennis Bowman kill her daughter, Alexis, aka Aundria, but she was also correct in her feelings of where he buried her body. Dennis later confessed to more crimes while incarcerated to the authorities, which included a sexual assault on a woman in San Diego, which was apparently where he was stationed. He further confessed that not long after him and Brenda were married, he assaulted 2 more women in San Diego, and then said that he had also assaulted a woman in a trailer park in the early 80s. Dennis still denies attacking young Meta when she was 6 years old, although she still believes her attacker to be Dennis. The problem with someone like Dennis Bowman is that there is never any knowing if these are truly the last of his victims or if we're going to find out about more and more. Authorities do not believe that Kathleen was Dennis's first murder victim, and I actually agree. The way the murder was carried out does not scream first victim to me either. Dennis Bowman would plead no contest to the charge of second-degree murder in the case of Aundria Bowman. On February 7th, 2022, Meta and Kathy were able to attend the sentencing of Dennis Bowman in Aundria's case. The judge made a comment about the horribleness of this case that she oversaw, and then she sentenced him to serve between 30 and 50 years, and to top it off, they sent his ass back to Virginia in order to keep him from getting control over any aspect of his crimes. After everything was over, Brenda Bowman offered Kathy half of Aundria's ashes. And although Kathy was glad for the case to be over, she was super pissed off, feeling like Brenda had split poor Aundria's body yet again, and felt so angry. Dennis Bowman is currently serving 2 life sentences at the River North Correctional Center in Virginia. All accounts would say that Brenda is still supporting her husband, even though there was a time where she had claimed not to know the man she was married to. And that, my friends, is the harrowing, awful, and sad story of the death of Aundria Bowman, aka Alexis Badger, the girl who did not deserve the life she got. Oh man, this story hurts, right? Crushing. First thing I want to say is that there was a small part of me in the beginning of my research before I knew all of these details that felt bad for Brenda, thinking that maybe she was a victim too, but that is no more for me. I do not believe for 1 second that that disgusting woman is a victim at all. I think that she chooses to pretend that he is not the monster that he actually is, and to that, I say they deserve each other. I wouldn't want to be her, that's for damn sure. Also, I totally agree with the authorities and many others who believe that Dennis has a ton more victims that he just hasn't shared. And I stumbled upon a sleuthing website where someone was talking about a victim that was found around the same time as Aundria, and now they themselves were wondering if it could be connected to Dennis Bowman. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. Also, the fact that Aundria was found in 4 different bags leads me to believe that she was dismembered further than just her legs, right? Oh, the thought of what happened to this poor girl and what she had to go through from birth to death is just horrifying. And I'm so glad that Kathy got to figure out what happened to her daughter and help put that piece of shit behind bars. I really encourage you guys to watch the Netflix documentary if you're able to. It really is good. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this twisted case as much as I did, and I hope to see you guys next week for another case here on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. A few quick reminders before you go. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your platform. It will help The Kill File and other true crime lovers find us. Also, check out the website at thekillfile.com to suggest a case. Find our merch shop for fun Kill File gear, which you can also find at thekillfile.printify.me and help support the podcast. Have a suggestion or want to share your own true crime stories? Email thekillfilepodcast@gmail.com for a chance to get them read on the podcast. Follow The Kill File on your favorite social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue X, TikTok, and of course, you can subscribe on YouTube as well. Find all of the links for the socials on the website. We are either listed as The Kill File or The Kill File Podcast. Come on back Mondays wherever you get your podcast fix when we will cover another case here on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye.